Welcome to It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach, where our purpose is to provide information and support while encouraging hope and faith to all individuals who are living with the impact of a severe and persistent mental illness or other challenging life situations.
Severe and persistent mental illnesses impact the lives not just of the individual who has it, but of the loved ones and friends around them. And it's so much involved with it. It impacts their socialization. It impacts their security, the feelings they have about themselves become with low self-esteem, and
Exactly.
Feeling insecure, feeling incapable, and a lot of times feeling very hopeless.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we started doing this type of show, because we want people to know that despite the term severe and persistent, that there is hope. People can and do recover. You know, Missionary Kelly, when we talk about severe and persistent mental illnesses, we're talking about some of the most devastating mental illnesses. We are talking like schizophrenia, bipolar,
schizoaffective disorder,
and major depression.
Yes.
And like you said, a lot of times these illnesses are lifelong disorders.
Yes.
So when a person is first diagnosed with a mental illness, or when a family member first finds out that their loved one has a mental illness, it can be just that, very devastating, and people feel hopeless, just like you said.
Yeah, and in the beginning it's very overwhelming until they actually find out what's going on. All they know is that there's some changes. They don't have this person anymore, and they're beginning to see, quote unquote, weird behavior.
Right.
You know, so they're wondering what's going on. And some people even go through it, how much of this is my fault? You know, what could I have done differently? The blame game.
Exactly.
And all that brings in, you know, a lot of self-condemnation as well. And when we talk severe and persistent, we're not, basically what we're saying is this is not a minor thing.
Exactly.
You know, and persistent, we're talking about being long-term. It's not something they're going to get over like a broke leg. You know, it's going to be there a while.
And I think that's the thing that makes severe and persistent mental illness, or mental illnesses in general, so hard to deal with, because it's not something that a person can just get over. It's something that is long-lasting. You know, you may have symptoms for a while, and then the symptoms might remit, and then they start up again, and that can be very hard. But what you said was really important. You mentioned information, which is why we do this type of show, and why we encourage family members and individuals, or if you know someone who's living with a mental illness, to get information, to get support. That is so important. On our website, we have a lot of information, a lot of links to other nonprofit organizations. And again, that's www.igbatt.com. But like we said, people can and do recover.
Yes, absolutely do. And when we think of recovery, we think of one of the definitions for recovery is being able to overcome a situation in your life. And when we talk about overcome, we're not saying it's a cure. What we're saying is bringing them to the place of first recognizing, second accepting, and then going on to find out how to maintain. And most of all, being aware, yes, there may be times that they have a good period, and another time that they may have, I'm going to use the word relapse.
Right. And I think when people understand that relapses happen, then the high points or the low points won't be so devastating. Now, what we have here and what we'd like to share with the listening audience is a list, a manual that we put together when we talk about faith-based recovery mindset. You know, there's a recovery, and then there's a faith-based recovery mindset. Because again, we're a faith-based program.
Absolutely.
But the first one that we have here is that a faith-based recovery mindset is freeing yourself from the prison of your limitations. And I think that's the first and one of the most important things. When you have a mental illness or a negative life situation, people see their lives being smaller than it really is. And they think about all the things that they can't do as opposed to the things that they can do.
Absolutely. It's focusing more so on the negative than on the positives. Or almost absolutely forgetting that there are even any positives.
And I think the thing is, you know, we're not saying that it's easy by any stretch of the imagination. It is definitely a challenge. But if other people can do it, you have to kind of tell yourself that I can do it too. There has to be a way.
Yes.
That you can't be hopeless. So when we talk about this small box that people put themselves in, oh, well, I can't take my medications by myself. I can't stay home by myself. I can't do this. But a lot of times we get those I can't messages or those negative messages by past experiences or by what other people have said that aren't really helpful to us.
The stigmas.
Exactly.
And stigmas usually come out of ignorance. The word says that my people perish for the lack of knowledge, and we're not knowledgeable because a lot of times we don't want to take the time to get involved, to know, and back to one of the words I used in the beginning, acceptance. Okay, it's being faith-based. We don't want to believe that people can have a mental disorder.
Right, but they do.
Yes.
But people do.
Absolutely.
They do. And and I think a lot of times when we talk about faith-based, for people who do have a strong faith in God, for them having a mental illness sometimes can be something, what's the problem? I must not be strong in my faith if I have a mental illness. Or I must not be praying if I have a mental illness.
And let me stop you right there. If we go back and we really look back, it's no one that God used in the Bible had it all together.
Exactly.
It was different things. Some it may have been speech, it may have been stature, it may have been something. It may have been they thought that Jeremiah thought that God could use him because he was a child. So even in that, he's giving us examples. When we have it all together, then we really don't need him.
And like you said, nobody has it all together.
That's right. That's right.
And I think it's so important that people realize that. A lot of times loved ones, they may have a person with a mental illness and they feel embarrassed, they feel a little self-conscious.
Yes.
And I usually try to encourage people, listen, we all have things that we're working through. Yours might be something that we can see, mine might be something that you can't see, but we all have something that we're working through.
And I think that part right there, you just said the embarrassment of it. It's something about the mind, because we can't just fix it. It brings in a form of fear. Because you don't know really what the person's thinking. You don't know what their next response is going to be. And it really takes a lot of faith and prayer to deal with someone that does have that you can be able to bring your own emotions in check while dealing with them.
And something you said right there that's really important, or the control piece. I think one reason why people have a lot of difficulty talking about mental health issues is because it's not that easy, number one. Number two, there is a kind of a lack of control.
Yes,
there are some things that we can't control. There are some things we don't really know why the brain becomes ill. And that's what we're talking about. When we talk about mental illnesses, we're talking about brain illnesses.
Yes.
A lot of people don't understand that just like the heart, just like the liver, the kidney, and other organs, can become ill. The brain can become ill as well.
Absolutely.
And that's the reason why we have different medications and just other support systems to kind of bring a balance to what's going on within the brain.
Right now, I do want to insert this there. It's just like with anything, any illness that you're going through, and I'm going to call him who he is, the devil will try and take advantage of it as an opportunity to bring in other negative things. We need to be aware of that also in there. It's such as one, fear.
Right.
Okay. Confusion.
Exactly. And anger, because again, this is something that we can't control. And mental illness is one of those types of animals that when you think you got it by the tail, then something else happens.
Absolutely.
And then you're like, oh my God, I'm so devastated. But when we talk about recovery, we understand that mental illnesses, just like any other chronic mental illness, they're all going to be ups and downs.
Yes.
And that's something that we really have to keep in mind, is that there will be ups and downs.
And as we in such, we're talking about us as it's being better all the time, mental health outreach, being faith-based, all the importance of support, being connected, because not to have to feel like you're going through this all by yourself.
Exactly. And I think that's so important. A lot of people, when they first diagnosed with a mental illness, or their loved one is diagnosed with a mental illness, because like you said, they don't know what's going on, or they're just afraid, they kind of isolate, which is the wrong thing to do.
That's right.
We want you to know that there are other people out there who are going through the same things that you're going through. It may not be you, but there are other people out there who are dealing with mental health issues.
And if my statistics is correct, it's about, what, 2% of the world population a year that is diagnosed with some form of mental illness.
So that's a lot of people.
Yes, it really is.
So that means whether you know it or not, I know it or not, the person next to us, the person in my class, the person that works with me, there is at least one person that we come in contact with on a daily basis that has a mental illness of some type.
Yeah. But until we get educated, until the information is put out there, you know, that person may feel like, I can't talk about this, and absolutely it does. It's important to know, come to an understanding of who I can and cannot talk to about it, because of the stigmas that are there that can make that person feel worse.
Exactly. You don't want to be around somebody who, like you said, who's going to make you feel worse, or say to you, hey, why don't you snap out of it and pull yourself together? Because we're talking about illnesses that you can't pull yourself together. And you and I, we talked about this before. It's really interesting how people will say to a person who has a mental illness, snap out of it, pull yourself together, but they won't say that to a person who has cancer.
Absolutely.
Or to a person who has diabetes.
That's right. That's right.
You know? So I think, again, going back to the stigma, going back to the discrimination, because that's what it is.
Yes.
You know, when we make a difference between a person with a mental illness or brain illness in comparison to another illness, we are discriminating against that person.
Absolutely.
But again, there is still hope. The second thing that we have here is many people who are living with a mental illness, whether it's their own or the illness of a loved one, never thought that it would happen to them.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we like to feel like we have it all together.
Exactly.
You know, that I'm on top of everything, you know. And but even in the midst of this, of never thinking it would ever happen, we still have to recognize that whatever God has allowed in our lives, there is a purpose for it. And we miss that many times in going through things, you know. It's like we almost forget that God is a part of it in the midst of going through these things.
And I think that's the thing when we talk about recovery. Our whole purpose is to kind of let you know that there is hope, but that you can recover. And like we said, recovery is not necessarily a cure, but it's living the best life you can.
And right here, I do want to say to whoever it is that may be having, going through with the mental illness, or to the family members, you need to know it's not your fault. You know?
And I think that's a big thing, especially when you have parents who have children, and a lot of times they wonder what I did wrong, maybe I did this, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And again, we're talking about brain illnesses, and it's nobody's fault.
That's it. How come I didn't see this coming on? You know, all these things. And the key thing is not to dwell on the fact that you know, what if and how come, but let's go from where we are.
And that's what recovery is. It's coming to the point where you realize, okay, I have this illness, I need to move forward, I need to take care of myself, I need to learn to live. And everyone has a purpose.
Yes.
And we believe that. We believe that God created everyone with a purpose in mind.
Absolutely.
And that purpose may not be the one that we initially thought when we first came into the world, but as we walk, as we grow, that purpose will be revealed.
Absolutely.
Number third one, a faith-based recovery mindset is choosing to take responsibility for your treatment and not being afraid to seek help when needed.
And it's getting to the place in this particular one of knowing yourself. Knowing when, okay, I'm not thinking as clearly as I usually do. I don't feel quite as up to par, you know, so that you can recognize and then you're talking about responsibility, you know, being able to recognize and pinpoint, okay, I need to let my doctor know that something's a little different, okay, to be able to catch it before it gets too far gone.
And I think one of the things that's so important is that when a person first comes out of the hospital, or when a person does have a clearer state, and we're talking about the individual who's living with a mental illness, that he or she sit down with their loved one or family member or a therapist and kind of think about, what are some of my relapse signs? What are some of the signs or the signals that indicate that there's something going on with me that needs to be addressed?
And I hear what you're saying, when they come out of the hospital. That means when they're in a state that we can talk about these things.
Exactly.
You know?
Because sometimes, let's face it, when you are in the active state of your illness, you don't really want to talk about recovery. You know, you might not even think that you have an illness.
And right here, I feel like we need to insert that, you know, some of the symptoms that maybe someone is going through and you're wondering what's going on. There are delusions, there are hallucinations.
And we're talking about schizophrenia.
Yes.
In particular.
Yeah, in particular. There, you know, some of these things will come on
and the hallucinations, just to stop you, are when you see or you think you hear things that are not really there.
Absolutely.
And the delusions have to do with your thoughts.
Yes. Yeah, when you so convinced yourself, and it's not the person's fault, I say again, but the delusions make them believe that what they're thinking is absolutely real.
Right. And a lot of times when a person, an individual is currently in that state, it's really hard to break that mindset, that delusion. So sometimes it's best not even to argue with it.
Absolutely.
Okay? When you have that delusion, it's an indicator that something needs to be addressed, whether the medications or definitely the medications needs to be addressed.
So that's when you to encourage loved ones, you need a lot of patience, a lot of endurance.